So, you want to get better at Mordhau. You want to become this, but you're currently stuck being this. While I'm no expert, I feel like I have enough experience to teach you what I know and help you get started with winning some fights. First up, we're going to talk about basic attacks. In Mordhau, there are two basic types of attacks, slashes and stabs. When you load into the game, you'll notice this little arrow on your crosshair. This indicates your attack direction. When you click the left mouse button, you'll perform a slash coming in from the direction of the arrow. If you scroll up on the mouse wheel, you'll perform a stab. Again, the direction of the arrow determines where the attack will start. Every attack can be chained into other attacks in a combo. This is as simple as starting another attack just as the first one is finishing. Every attack has multiple phases: wind up, release, and recovery. This is very important to know, as certain actions can and cannot be performed during different phases. The wind up phase is when you're pulling your weapon back. This phase is crucial to manipulating your attack using feints and morphs, which we'll get into shortly. The release phase is when your weapon will actually be swung and can collide with things, including enemies, obstacles, and the environment. The recovery phase happens after release. This is when your character will return to the idle state. This phase is when you are most vulnerable to attacks. With this basic knowledge, you should at least be able to swing your weapon at someone. The attack indicator is very intuitive and easy to learn, but if you want to get into more advanced combat, I recommend setting up keybinds for each attack. I'll talk more about this towards the end of the video. In Mordhau, every attack that you perform can be fully manipulated by moving your mouse. You can drag your swings to slow them down and throw off your opponent's timing by moving the mouse away from the direction you're swinging. Or alternatively, you can accelerate your swing by moving it towards the attacking direction. This will speed up the attack. I highly recommend practicing swing manipulation as it is one of the most useful things in the game. So while throwing off your opponent's timing is nice, you can also trick them into blocking early, which can score you a free hit. There are two main ways to do this: feints and morphs. Feinting is when you cancel an attack just before it starts. By pressing Q during the wind-up phase, your attack will completely stop. This is useful for avoiding hitting a teammate who runs in front of you, and also for tricking your opponent. You can perform a feint multiple times in a row, but it uses stamina each time, so be careful about overdoing it. Another way of tricking your opponent is to morph your attacks. This means changing your attack into a different one just before the release phase. There are two main types of morphs: slash to stab and stab to slash. For example, if you start a stab and just before the weapon hits the release phase you start a slash, you will actually change your attack into the other one, or vice versa. This can be very useful, and I personally prefer it to feinting. However, using both feints and morphs together is recommended. A final bit of advice on attacks is to try not to spam. Players who just spam attacks hoping to hit something are the easiest people to kill, and more likely than not will hit their own teammates. Always try to think about what you're doing and the position of your weapon, as hitting a teammate will actually stop your attack mid-swing. So it's better for you and for your team that you learn to avoid hitting them. Of course, just swinging your weapon at people means nothing if you're getting your head chopped off, so you're also going to need to learn how to defend yourself. In Mordhau, there are multiple ways to avoid getting hit. The most basic of these is a parry. Parrying is as simple as pressing the right mouse button just before being hit. This will block the attack and prevent it from doing any damage. Be careful not to panic and spam your parries, as you will become an easy target for feints. Parries are quite useful for keeping the flow of the fight going. If you start an attack just after parrying, you'll perform a riposte, which is much faster than just blocking and then attacking in two separate steps. A riposte is essentially doing both in the same action. It's important to note that you cannot feint a riposte, but you can morph it. Another way of deflecting attacks is by chambering. Chambering can be quite tricky to do when you're first getting started, but I'm going to explain it anyway. A chamber is when you mirror your opponent's attack just before it hits. So, if your opponent comes in with a slash from the left side, you want to start a slash from the right side just before their attack hits you. Or, the most simple type of chamber is when your opponent tries to stab you, you start your own stab just before theirs hits. This will stop their attack and start a very quick attack of your own, which is faster than even a riposte. You can perform both feints and morphs on chambered attacks, but they do eat quite a bit of stamina, so again, don't overdo them. I recommend spacing your chambers out during a fight, as if you chamber constantly, your opponent will quickly get used to the faster attacks and they'll be able to defend against them. Another way that you can defend yourself is by kicking. You can do this by pressing F. Kicks are a fairly risky move, as you will be completely open to an attack while doing the animation. However, if your attack hits your opponent, it will stun them and take a chunk of their stamina away. Kicks are mainly useful against opponents who get right up in your face, or against players hiding behind a shield. You can also defend against the kick by simply performing your own kick just before theirs hits you. A little move that I like to use against shield users is a chamber morphed into a kick. So for example, if your opponent tries to stab you, chamber his stab, but start an attack during the windup of your chamber. This will morph your stab attack into a kick, and it will temporarily knock their shield out of the way, which will leave them open to an attack. The last way of defending yourself is simply moving out of the way. In Mordhau, your full body is checked for collisions, and leaning up and down will actually change your hitbox accordingly. You can use this to your advantage to duck under attacks, or lean back away from them. This can be quite tricky to get right, but it is very effective. Also, it's important to be aware of your positioning. Always try to keep as much distance between yourself and your opponent as you can. Against less skilled players, you can sometimes just step back and avoid their swings. Putting all of this together will not make you a great player overnight, but it is a foundation that you can build upon by practicing. Find duel servers, or even just play against bots. The AI in Mordhau isn't terrible, and if you're new to the game, it can actually provide quite a decent challenge. So when you're feeling more comfortable with the basics of Mordhau, you might want more control over your character. I highly recommend setting up custom keybinds for each attack. I'll show you the binds I use, and you can either copy these or set up your own. Firstly, set your control scheme to custom and disable all of these checkboxes. This will turn off the directional attack system, which is important for setting up your own binds. Once you've done this, head into your keybinds and scroll down. So I have the left mouse button bound to a right strike. I also have the mouse wheel down, bound to right upper strike. If you have thumb mouse buttons like I do, I have mine bound to right lower strike and left lower strike respectively. The most important bind here is actually left alt. I have this bound to flip attack side. This basically lets you hold down alt while fighting, and this will flip the attack direction for anything you do, which saves having extra binds for those other directions. These of course are just my personal preferences, and you might want to play around with this to find binds that suit your playstyle. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover in this guide. Keep practicing everything I've mentioned in this video and you will improve quickly. I hope this guide has been useful. This is the first time I've ever made a video like this, so please let me know if it does help you in any way. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been useful, and I will see you next time.